The Egyptian president meets with the commander of U.S. Central Command alongside senior Egyptian and U.S. officials. The Syrian Interior Ministry confirms that security forces have succeeded in calming the situation in Sweden. And Pope Leo XIV expresses profound sorrow over the deadly Israeli strike on the Catholic Holy Family Church in Gaza. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has met with Commander of the U.S. Central Command, General Michael Kurilla, alongside senior Egyptian and U.S. officials. Kurilla conveyed U.S. President Donald Trump's greetings, which President el-Sisi appreciated and affirmed the deep strategic partnership between Egypt and the U.S. Discussions focused on enhancing bilateral cooperation, especially in military and security fields, and addressing regional crises. President el-Sisi stressed Egypt's ongoing efforts for a Gaza ceasefire, detainee exchange, and urgent aid, while highlighting the Nile's critical importance to Egypt's national security and the need for regional de-escalation. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has discussed the latest Arab crises, especially developments in Gaza and the West Bank, with Arab League chief Ahmed Abul-Ghait. They emphasized Egypt and Qatar's efforts for a ceasefire and urgent humanitarian aid, and reaffirmed the pursuit of a just, comprehensive Palestinian settlement based on international legitimacy. The talks also covered Syria, Libya, Sudan, the Horn of Africa, and Red Sea security. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi reiterated Egypt's unwavering support for the Arab League's pivotal role in uniting Arab efforts. The Egyptian Ministry of Interior has announced it had received intelligence confirming that Hasma, a terrorist group linked to the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood and on the run in Turkey, was plotting attacks on critical security and economic sites. In a statement, the Egyptian Ministry of Interior said the group assigned a fugitive member, Ahmed Ghanim, to infiltrate Egypt illegally and execute the plan with the aid of another operative. The statement affirmed that security forces raided their Gaza hideout, where the terrorists opened fire, resulting on their deaths. The tragic loss of a civilian bystander and injury to a police officer. Authorities identified several Hasma leaders orchestrating the plot and reaffirming their unwavering resolve to counter all threats to Egypt's stability. Now we move on to the latest developments in Syria. A fragile calm settled over the Syrian city of Swaideh as internal security forces were deployed to Al Mazraa village, blocking on Bedouin tribesmen from entering the area. A tribal member said they would wait until 1 p.m. local time for Druze fighters to surrender arms, injured and dead bodies following days of intense clashes. Residents reported no gunfire this morning, and a Druze source confirmed calm in most parts of the region. Despite the ceasefire, which was announced Saturday by Syrian presidency, violence quickly resumed, highlighting the challenges faced by President Ahmed al-Shara in controlling the nation. Syrian Interior Minister Anas Khattab confirmed that security forces have succeeded in calming the situation in Suwayda following their deployment in the northern and western parts of the city. He added that the security forces were able to enforce a ceasefire within Suwayda city, noting that the ceasefire paves the way for a prisoner exchange and the restoration of stability across the province. The minister also stated that the deployment of security forces in Suwayda serves as a safeguard for stability and calm and is a key step towards curbing the spread of weapons and restoring order. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has declared a ceasefire in the northern province of Suwayda following days of violent clashes between Druze and Bedouin groups worsened by Israeli military strikes. The announcement has drawn international support, including from the UK, France, and Japan. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy called for a sustainable ceasefire, while France urged Syrian authorities to protect all civilians and investigate abuses. Japan also emphasized the need for a swift implementation of the ceasefire amid ongoing concerns over the violence. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that U.S. has been actively engaged in discussions with Israel, Jordan, and Syria over the past 3 days in escalating violence in southern Syria. Rubio urged Damascus to act to end the conflict, prevent Daesh and other groups from entering the area, and stop the fighting between Druze and Bedouin groups. Meanwhile, Syrian forces have reportedly cleared Bedouin fighters from the Druze majority city of Suwayda, following a ceasefire order by President Ahmed al-Shara. Syrian media reported that Israeli warplanes were seen flying over the countryside of Suwayda, coinciding with a return to calm in the city. Meanwhile, Syria's Minister of Emergency and Disaster Management, Raed al-Saleh, announced the preparation of a convoy to evacuate families from tense areas in the city of Shahba, located in Suwayda province. He noted that 21 shelter centers have been prepared in Daraa province, with work ongoing to equip around 20 more. And for further analysis on the situation, we're joined from Damascus we move on to Hani Saif in our newsroom. Hani.
Thank you, Rana. I'm in Cairo in our newsroom, and for further analysis, we're joined from Damascus by Mr. Hussein Talib, the political analyst. Welcome to Qnews, Mr. Talib. Now, what challenges may prevent the ceasefire in Suwayda from holding effectively? What factors contribute to continued clashes despite official announcements?
Actually, the Syrian government withdrew its security forces a few days ago. This made the Syrian tribes, to stand by their brothers in Suwayda. Suwayda is not all from Druze. 2/3 are from Druze, and third is from Bedouin tribes who were exposed to violations, displacements, and killing from the armed Druze faction. This made tribes move to Suwayda and to start a war that killed many people from both parties after the withdrawal of the Syrian government. So many violations were made from both parties, whether from the Druze or the Bedouins. This made the world on top of which the U.S. agree on the reality to have a new agreement under the auspices of the U.S. between the factions and the Syrian government. Of course, Israel's involvement hindered the deal for many days, but eventually we reached an agreement. Yesterday, the factions were withdrew, and the Syrian regime was deployed, and the heavy arms were withdrew. Now there are new humanitarian and medical convoys were sent to Suwaida, on top of which is the Minister of Health, and they started to send this aid according to the agreement between Syrian government and Druze factions under the auspices of Turkish, Jordan, U.S. and Saudi and Emirates auspices.
Mr. Talib, we'll talk later about the Israeli involvement, but how might the deep-rooted sectarian nature of the Druze-Bedouin conflict influence the prospect for lasting peace and reconciliation in the Suwaida region?
Actually, the state proposed a program to disarm with disarmament of the Druze factions and Bedouins as well. But the clashes erupted, and the Israeli involvement hindered the state's efforts of disarmament, which made the clashes continue, resulting of more than 1,000 death toll from both parties. So disarmament and the role of state will make the situation peace. It was unpeaceful with factions' existence, whether Bedouins or the Druze. So state's existence will create peace. The Syrian state were able to secure millions of Syrians and to spread peace in Damascus. Some violations were taken place in Latakia, but it wasn't that major. Syrian state was able to spread peace on many areas, about 70 to 80% of Syria, and was able, with its military institution, to take over the borders between Iran and Syria in order not to smuggle weapons. So the only safeguard in order not to have any clashes, whether among minorities or factions, is to support Syrian state.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned earlier that Israel's involvement hindered reaching the ceasefire earlier, but in what other ways does Israel's involvement complicate further the dynamics of the conflict and Syria's internal stability?
Actually, the first day of war of clashes, when the Syrian security forces involved, we reached a deal with the Druze factions. But on the second day, Sheikh Hikmat al-Hajri, the Druze leader, gained Israeli support, so he violated the deal. So Israel started to strike Damascus and Suwaida, and to strike the presidential palace, which hindered the state existence in Suwaida, and had to withdraw. This withdrew escalated the situation. Now the situation is different. The tribes' involvement and the threat, the warnings that made by Jordanian tribes to Israel, which are the extension of Suwaida's tribe, they are interconnected in Arab world. So Israel received a message and made this deal real. So the involvement of tribes without this warning and Israelis' involvement made the deal difficult. So now the U.S. factor convinced Israel of the necessity of not targeting Syrian state, which we heard by Tom Barak, the U.S. envoy to Syria, that weakening Syria will impact the region, including Israel. So everyone has to support the state and to stop, and Syria has to stop violations of minorities, which were promised by the state, which was asserted by Mr. Ahmed al-Sharaa in his statement that every perpetrator will be held accountable. So the state first has to be strong in order to hold perpetrators accountable. So any violators will be punished, which was promised by Mr. Ahmed al-Sharaa, President Ahmed al-Sharaa.
So other than the Druze and the Bedouins, it seems that there are many regional and international actors with competing interests. Now, how do you think these interests will impact the enforcement and sustainability of ceasefire agreements?
Actually, these interventions impact the region, not only Syria. When the Israeli targeted Syria, Syria felt weakened in front of these strong targets. Iran immediately intervened and wanted to re-weaponize their militias, which affect the region. Hezbollah moved on the Lebanese Syrian borders. Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, said we will face Syrian terrorism coming from Syria. But the U.S. intervention and the agreement and redeployment of Syrian state made Iran backward. According to the U.S. report, that Iran wanted to weaponize or to send more weapons to Syria. So after the protection of Syrian army to the borders, it actually succeeded in curbing back Iran. So now our choice, we've been having 7 months of none dealing with weapons with Iran or other factions. Syria wanted peace solutions because war will weaken the state.
From Damascus, we were joined by Mr. Hussein Talib, the political analyst. Thank you, Mr. Talib, for joining us here on Q News. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go back to Rana Al-Assas in our studio. Rana.
Thank you so much, Hani. And clashes intensified on Saturday near Syria's Druze majority region of Swayda, where armed Bedouin or tribesmen pledged to continue fighting until their demands are met. Sectarian violence has raged for days, marked by machine gun fire and mortar shelling, as the government of President Ahmed al-Sharaa tried to enforce a fragile ceasefire. The Syrian government deployed security forces to the area and called for all parties to uphold the ceasefire following nearly a week of deadly fighting. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that the violence since last week has claimed at least 940 lives. A few Druze residents gathered by the fence separating Israeli-controlled Golan Heights in Syria, as reports emerged that tribal fighters had withdrawn from Suwaida, Syria, bringing a fragile calm to the region. In recent days, some Druze had crossed the border into Syria to support their king amid fierce clashes between Bedouin and Druze fighters that erupted a week ago. The Syrian government declared that Bedouin fighters had pulled back from the predominantly Druze city following Damascus's deployment of troops, which faced accusations of violations against the Druze community. Israeli strikes targeted Syrian forces before a truce was reached on Wednesday. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa has decried the world's silence over the catastrophic conditions in the Gaza Strip, stressing that the situation is unbelievable and irrational. Mustafa emphasized that the top priority is first to stop the bloodshed in Gaza, second to begin reconstruction, and third to unify Gaza and its institutions with the national institutions in order to immediately launch the rebuilding process and realize the state on the ground. Pope Leo XIV has expressed profound sorrow over a deadly Israeli strike on the Catholic Holy Family Church in Gaza City, calling for an immediate end to the barbarity of war. Speaking during the Sunday Angelus prayer, the Pope named the 3 Christians killed and extended his prayers to their families and all the parishioners. The Pope appealed to the international community to uphold humanitarian law, protect civilians, and hold the use of collective punishment and indiscriminate force.
Contro la popolazione civile e i luoghi di culto a Gaza. Chiedo nuovamente che si fermi subito la barbarie.
Israeli attacks across Gaza have killed 67 seekers. 9 were killed and 55 others wounded near an aid center in northern Gaza, while 5 Palestinians died near another aid center north of Rafah in southern Gaza. Gaza's health ministry reports at least 130 killed and 495 others wounded in the past 24 hours, bringing the death toll since the war began to 58,895, with 140,980 others injured. Israeli occupation forces have issued new displacement orders in 7 blocks of Deir al-Balah, including areas with tent encampments, demanding residents evacuate ahead of an expected military assault. Verified footage showed the Israeli army dropping leaflets over residential zones, warning civilians to leave immediately due to impending attacks. Despite such orders, areas designed as safe zones by Israel continue to be targeted, leaving Palestinians with no secure refuge amid ongoing strikes. Gaza's health ministry has announced that 3 World Health Organization WHO trucks loaded with medical supplies are set to enter the enclave today. The ministry emphasized that the supplies, which do not include food, are critical for supporting medical facilities, providing life-saving care amid the ongoing war. Authorities urge citizens, community leaders and families to avoid approaching the convoy to ensure its safe arrival at hospitals and to help save lives. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has accused Israel of starving civilians in Gaza, including 1 million children, by maintaining a siege that blocks vital aid deliveries. In a statement posted on X, UNRWA urged Israel to lift the blockade and allow the agency to deliver food and medicine into the besieged enclave. Currently, food distribution is being managed at 4 points by the United States and Israeli backed through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. However, aid seekers are being shot at while trying to collect desperately needed supplies. Nearly 900 people have been killed since the GHF began operations in late May. A ship carrying civilian activists, including lawyers, doctors, and journalists, departed from Italy's Gallipoli port, aiming to break the naval blockade of the Gaza Strip once again. The Freedom Flotilla coalition vessel, the Handalla, set sail with toys and life-saving humanitarian aid for Gaza's children, along with a message of global solidarity. Last month, a similar mission by coalition ship Medin was intercepted by the Israeli naval forces, who boarded and seized the vessel carrying Swedish activist Greta Thunberg. Israeli demonstrators and relatives of detainees marched to the United States Embassy in Tel Aviv, urging President Donald Trump to assist in securing the release of Israelis held in Gaza. A protester called for a finalized deal between Israel and Hamas to begin the process of healing. Another demonstrator expressed deep concern, saying he was scared for the destiny of the detainees. On Friday, Trump his lawmakers and told lawmakers at a White House dinner that 10 detainees would be released from Gaza very shortly, but did not offer further details. Hamas's spokesperson said this group supports an interim truce proposal involving the return of 10 detainees and bodies of 18 Palestinians over 60 days in exchange for the release of Palestinian detainees by Israel. If negotiations fall, Hamas could demand a full package deal. Palestinians in the occupied West Bank are facing increasing challenges to their water supply due to Israeli settler attacks. Subhili Olian, who manages wells and pipelines, said settlers' attacks that break pipelines halt water pumping, cutting off villages. Some communities rely only on the Ain el Shamsiya spring, supplying around 110,000 people. Isa Qasasi, chairman of the managing company, called for the attacks a tactic for Israeli land grabs, forcing people to move by restricting water access. And moving on to Tehran, where Iran has replaced air defense systems damaged in Israeli attacks last month. According to Mahmoud Mousavi, the deputy for operations in Iran's regular army, domestic resources were used to install prearranged backup systems stored in secure locations to maintain airspace security. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. The Egyptian president meets with commander of U.S. Central Command alongside senior Egyptian and U.S. officials. The Syrian Interior Ministry confirms that security forces have succeeded in calming the situation in Sweden. And Pope Leo XIV expresses profound sorrow over the deadly Israeli strike on the Catholic Holy Family Church in Gaza. This concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.